Bismillah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Salatu wassalamu ala Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa alayhi sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome to the second installment of our Storytime series. Today we will be talking about Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, and inshallah we will hand over now to the Ustadh. Jazakallahu khair.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم من نفخه ونفثه وحمزه بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي بنعمته تتم الصالحات ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيد السادات دليل الخيرات سيد الأولين والآخرين إمام الأولياء والمتقين سيد الأبرار وزين المرسلين الأخيار وأكرم من أظلم عليه الليل وأشرق عليه النهار رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب أوزعني أن أشكر نعمتك التي أنعمت علي وعلى والدي وأن أعمل صالحا ترضاه وأصلح لي في ذريتي إني تبت إليك وإني من المسلمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقدار العظيم وبعد. Okay, before we start, how many people here were here last week? Oh, everyone, right? There's no one that wasn't, okay. Right, okay, so I didn't scare you guys. Goodness me, okay. The reason why I asked that question is I want you guys to notice a common theme between these two people. And when you see great lights, people who their lives have affected millions of people, and you see that there's just one common thing between both of them, at the very least, I hope you would at least leave today wanting to aspire for the same thing they both aspired. With Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, I'm not going to do this game again because you're all here and you all know where Senegal is. But with him, he was born here in around Mbake area. Okay, so we spoke about Kaolack last week. Now we're going a bit up north in Mbake here. Okay, and just like last week, I have a drone shot of this place as well. So this is Touba. This is the mosque he established in Senegal. Touba is called from the name in the Quran. Allah said, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Bada al-Islamu ghariban, wa sayaudu ghariban kama bada, fatuba lil-ghuraba." That Islam started as a strange religion and it will return as a strange religion. So Tuba, which some scholars say is a place in paradise for the strangers. Okay, I'm sure there's another verse in the Quran about it which I'm quickly going to check, or if anyone wants to tell me, there we go. للذين آمنوا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات طوبى لهم وحسن مآب. Surah Al-Ra'd. Allah says, for those who believe and do righteous actions, they will have طوبى. It says translated as a good final. They'll have paradise, or a good final end, a good final state, and there shall be a goodly return. طوبى, it's a place where, like last week, founded for the sake of Allah. Okay, founded, it's a town which was literally built from scratch for the sake of Allah. And honestly, places like this are very special. If you've never been to a place, of course I'm hoping you've gone to Mecca, Medina. These are also, Mecca was there before, but Medina became Medina because of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Places which before was nothing and just was started from scratch, before, just for the sake of Allah, are special places. In the Quran, Allah says, لَمَسْجِدٌ أُسِّسَ عَلَى التَّقْوَى مِنْ أَوَّلِ يَوْمٍ أَحَقُّ أَن تَقُومَ فِيهِ. Allah telling the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that for sure a mosque that is founded on God consciousness from the first day, from its onset, is a more rightful place for you to place your feet in. Okay? So, if you ever think of going to West Africa, the place I mentioned last week, and this is a very beautiful place as well, a nice place to visit, Touba. Now, more about Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. He was born, as I said, in Mbaka, in Senegal. His parents, Sheikh Muhammad Muammar Antasal, he was actually also a known scholar who the kings and the princes loved, right? Because of his gentleness and because of his vast amount of wisdom. And his mom, Jara, or Jariyatullah, Maryam Bousso, she was actually a descendant of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from Imam Hassan, from Abi Talib, from Imam Hassan bin Abi Talib. So he lived from 1853. I couldn't find any details of when exactly he was born. You can imagine at that time, knowing your year of birth enough is a miracle, right? Compared to being able to know like the months. These things were not necessarily recorded much. But he died on the 19th of July, 1927, on the 20th of Muharram. He was someone whose complete life was dedicated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To tell you a bit more about him, so he came from as I said, Jara Busso, Jariya, or Jariyatullah, her family goes back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His uncle here, Muhammad Busso, was a great scholar who was known, as well as a great scholar. His mother, Mama Anta Sali, they used to describe her as she would carry Mukhtasal Khalil. Anyone knows what Mukhtasal Khalil is? Yes, what's Mukhtasal? Is a book, is the shape, what's that book for the Hanafis? Oh my God, now I feel bad. What's that book for the Hanafis, the top book? Oh yeah, Ilahi. Al-Hidayah. It's like the Hidayah for Hanafis, basically. So Mukhtasar Khalil, multiple volumes, is the go-to text for Maliki fiqh, is what you study at the end. His mother used to carry this around. What does that tell you about her and her dedication to knowledge? His grandmother, Mam Asta, right? Mam Asta, she was a Tijani Sheikha who had hundreds, 200 to 300 students. And she had a farm, and they said that when you'd see her from afar, you'd think she was a man, because she used to dress like a man. And she would have a farming hoe on one hand and a masbaha on the other hand, right? So what does that tell you from the family where he's from? They're all, at least many people in his family, were dedicated to learning. And that should, the Prophet Muhammad asked us to really inculcate in our children the love for Allah, love for the Quran. And you can see with this kind of family background, this was in his upbringing from a young age, right? And of course, it's no wonder, in the Quran, when Allah spoke about the orphans, that he sent a prophet. In fact, he sent two prophets, because the boy with Musa eventually became a prophet. He sent two prophets to go and take care of the house, of the wall of an orphan, to take care of the inheritance of the orphans. Why? Because their 7th generation grandfather was a righteous person, right? You can see the kind of family Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba comes from. So it's not a surprise as to what he would eventually turn out to be. So he was, as I just mentioned, raised by his family, and his family was known for scholarship and knowledge. He was known for the type of piety that had zero regard for the dunya. He had zero interest in the dunya. Even though his father was someone that was employed by the courts of the king, right? When his father passed away, when he was about 30 years old, the chief of the town he then made a statement, made a speech in his father's funeral. And he said, now we must go to the king and basically, greet him and tell him of this that has happened so we can accept his condolence. And we will recommend that the king replaces you in the same position that your father had. Now you can imagine, put yourself in his position. Young upcoming scholar, 30-something years old, known amongst his peers for his knowledge, his dedication, and now he's given an opportunity for his dunya to be set. He would not need to work one extra day in his life. Guess what he said? See that quote at the bottom there? I thank you for your condolences and for your advice. However, I do not adopt the habit of visiting kings. I have zero ambition with regards to their riches, and I only seek honor from Allah Ta'ala. That's someone whose principles will not allow him to even consider what was a halal role. It's not as if working, his father wasn't doing a haram job, right? But he felt he needed to keep a distance that will not put him in a situation where if the king were to do something wrong, he would not be able to speak against it because he's been fed by the king. And this is a stance with many scholars in the past have also taken. And many of them were imprisoned for it. But in his case, he was someone who, by his father's death, he was now able to come out of that shell, and was just, many people called him like a foolish person. How dare you? You might think about it. You know, you're in a situation where you have no real source of income, and you're now given a source of halal, at least according to many people would consider this halal, right? But he said no, because he had zero interest in the dunya, zero, right? And he only wanted to focus on him and his journey to Allah via service to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Actually, my teacher, one of my teachers that I learned probably 60 to 70% of my knowledge from throughout university days, he wrote a PhD, which I can share with you guys, on his life and epistemology. And guess who was one of the people that marked his PhD? Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad. So Sheikh Abdul Hakim is like my grand teacher, basically. I invited him to UCL 2001 when I was the Amir of the ISOC then, but I don't think he remembers me for that. But anyway, but that was, this is the kind of person, my teacher, what he used to say to us when he would teach us, he said that he personally, because he was also a Muridi, so he belonged to this same tariqah, he said he would never learn from scholars for dollars. Those were his words. He'd tell us that. He said he would never learn from anybody. Not that it was haram, but he was so stringent in the people he would take knowledge from that they cannot be attributed or associated with any government. Because he needed to be sure that these people, not only did they have a sanad back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they also had a connection that cannot be tainted with any government or any political party or anything, okay? So what was his life like? He was born, his father was Qadiri in Tariqah, so Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. He was initiated into that Tariqah by his father. Then he adopted the Shadhili path for 8 years. There's a saying amongst the people of Tasawwuf that Man lam yatashadhal lam yatasawwaf. Whoever has not taken anything from the Shadhilis has not tasted Sufism, because of Abu Hassan al-Shadhili and his renowned repute for his spirituality and his level. Then he did that for 8 years. Then he adopted the Tijani Tariqah as well for 8 years. And in doing all of this, he really reached the peak of knowledge of what he could see, what he could get from all of the teachers, from all of those shuyukh. And then after that, he then made this statement. He said, I've transcended men and all that has come from their hands, and in order to return to the Lord of men. So he then focused completely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directed him to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam directly. Right? So he was directed to the Muhammadan light. And as such, he founded the Tariqah Muridiyya. What does it mean, Muridiyya? It's basically a path that teaches you how to follow the Prophet, right? The goal is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in destroying all the pharaohs of the inner pharaohs and the outer ones, okay? And that's essentially what it was. So he founded this in 1883, and loads of people followed him. Loads, a lot of illiterate people, a lot of poor people, a lot of people followed him. Now you can imagine at that time, Senegal was a French colony, right? What happens when a random man starts becoming very famous? You saw with the story last week what happened. He had to do what? He had to migrate away. But this was in this particular case, this was now under French colony, you know. And before we get there, this was his statement to those who wanted him to continue his father's work. He wrote this poem responding to them to show them that he has zero interest in this dunya, right? And he has zero interest in quoting kings or in wanting anything to do with the dunya, right? This was someone who will not allow. And it's very important to really, when you look at Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's life, he wasn't doing this out of principle, right? Because there is an attachment to principle whereby you think, oh, I have this principle. No, he was doing this out of a direct connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what Allah inspired him to do. There's a huge difference between that. There are people who learn certain principles, and based on those principles, they will do certain things. His was not based on principle. He was someone who was directly connected to the Muhammadan light through following the Sunnah to a level where Allah then inspires your heart. Allah says in the Quran, وَمَنْ يُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِ قَلْبًا. That's a promise in the Quran. Whoever truly believes in Allah, Allah will guide their heart. Right? That's a jumla shartiyya, they say in Arabic. If you fulfill the first part, the second part will happen. Right? وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. Whoever puts their trust in Allah, Allah is sufficient for them. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those who strive for us, we will definitely guide them to our paths. So that was what he was doing. He had a direct connection to Allah and His Messenger. As such, he had zero need for any other human being. He had zero need for reliance on any other being. Just like our, noble companion and master, Abu Bakr, when he was asked to donate for the battle, and he brought what? Everything he had. Why? Because he had zero need for everything in this world. Zero. And when they asked him, what have you left for your family? He left the biggest treasure anyone can have, Allah and His Messenger. And that's the path that people like Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba followed. Right? They had zero interest in the dunya. Everything he did was just for Allah and His Messenger. Okay. So, as you start, yes, go on.
Can we read his poem, please?
Oh yeah, I'll share this with anyone who wants it, by the way. Okay? And there is a vault which I'll share after, which has, right, loads of his. He wrote, as you're going to see later. Don't worry, right? I got you all, okay? Right. So when he was starting to gain fame, he was envied by so many local leaders. And for me as a black person, black Nigerian, I find that a lot of my people, they are very quick to point fingers at others and what others have done to us. But they're not very good at being very introspective at what we might have done to ourselves. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, the first people to start reporting him to the French were not French people, right? They were local scholars who were afraid and envious of his popularity. And they started, there are documents, which is in the PhD that I do, there are documents that prove what the kind of things they were saying to the French governors, really lying about him, saying that he was planning jihad, saying that he was planning to become when they say that he was a mujahid, they don't mean mujahid al-nafs, they mean he's going to be a terrorist, basically, right? And when they accused him of being a mujahid, do you know what he said? He said, "Inni mujahidun bil ulumi wa tuqa, abdan khadiman wal muhayminu shahidu." He said, I only strive with knowledge and God consciousness as a complete servant of Allah, right? Complete slave who is eternally serving Allah, right? While Allah, the protector, Al-Muhaymin, is the one that is witnessing all that he does. That's someone who, if you look, just this line alone tells you this is all I'm about, but I'm not afraid of you guys because Wal-Muhayminu shahidu, the one who protects everything, who not a leaf falls from the tree without his knowledge, is the one that will protect me. And he had guarantee from Allah that he will be protected from all of the ills and everything. Wallahu ya'asimuka minan nas. He had that promise from Allah that Allah will protect you from people. Okay? So, when all of these letters started gathering around and gathering pace, the local governors started summoning him, saying, come to our place. And because he didn't go, long and short of it, he was ill, he couldn't really move, and they then decided to exile him to Gabon. Now, Gabon at that time had the tsetse fly, which its bite was fatal. When the French people would exile people to places like this, they knew that it was what? Certain death. They did not expect them to return. And there were many scholars that were exiled and never returned. So when they exiled him for 7 years, there's actually a story which, if any of you have heard about him, you would have heard this story about him. This story, my teacher that did this, his PhD on him, he said this story was found in French sources. So not Muslims sources that reported this. Because, so while he was on the ship to Gabon, he asked to pray. And they refused. Then he took his sajada and he jumped on the river and he put his sajada there and prayed on the river, and the French people saw him do this. This was a miracle that was not, there were no Muslims there. Right? So this was a miracle that was witnessed by French people. And they wrote it in their records that this is what they saw this man do. Can you imagine how they would have felt and realized, okay, this is someone we can't really mess around with. Okay? A lot of people became Muslim through his interaction with them. While he was in Gabon, he wrote so many books. All he was doing there was writing and studying. Okay? Now, when this happened, and for many years, he didn't die, and while he was still in exile, his community continued to grow, right? Because they focused on service and building communities, education, and really strong work ethic. They were real experts in building communities, focused on Quran and Sunnah, teaching them the Quran, teaching them spirituality, teaching them a real genuine love for Allah and His Messenger, and teaching them to serve people. Right? So the French actually noticed that like the production of groundnut more than doubled. Right? It increased so much during this time that they sort of realized, okay, we can't really hold him out for too long. So they brought him back in 1902. When they brought him back in 1902, there were many scholars that came to visit him and welcome him. Some even came from Medina Munawwara. Shurafa, from the family of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, came from Medina. You know how long they took to travel from Medina back in the days? There were no planes, there were no, it took 1 month. That's how long people from the family of the Prophet in Mecca, Medina, came to visit who? Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. Okay? So, when he came back, did they release him? No. Right? They basically, imagine someone who they sent away to die, now he's come back with a much bigger audience, and his popularity continued to even grow at a much faster pace. So what did they do again? They summoned him again. Right? And and this kind of summoning, it's usually impromptu. They do it as a prelude to wanting to show him who the boss is. And of course, someone whose connection is only to Allah and His Messenger, you can't boss them around like that. Right? So he would respond back to them, but he would tell them, this is what's going on. And then, what did they do again? They exiled him again to Mauritania this time. Now, exiling him to Mauritania, another big mistake they didn't imagine, because there were many of the Shurafa and the people of Ilm in Mauritania that became his students. He gained so much fame in that place that many people, because they saw this was someone of Allah, who had a real direct connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger. So he was exiled there, and that increased his fame among scholars in Mauritania. Okay? And he wrote many books and all of this. As you'll see later on, he wrote over 7 tons of books, hundreds of books. Many of them were buried or thrown into the Atlantic Ocean. And some of them, many of them, are in chests in Tuba right now that has never been opened. Why? Because he didn't open them before he died. So they left them like that. Right? So he was placed under house arrest when he came back from Mauritania. And they even placed him in a far place so that his followers would have to journey far to get to him. That didn't deter them. They still went in droves. Then they decided to try to put a tax for those traveling, right? Like a levy, like a toll on the way for those traveling. Then they were warned that, look, if you do this, you're risking proper civil war, right? This guy has not done anything to you, but don't stop his people from going to him. Then eventually they transferred him to Jurbel, which, if you remember from the map, here. Okay? So they transferred him to here to sort of have a closer eye on him. Okay? And while he was there in 1912, he was transferred in 1912. In 1913, French photographer decided one day that he was going to ask him and take his picture. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba did istikhara and he was given the permission, and this is the only picture that's known of him. That's why whenever you see his picture, you'll either see this picture or half of it or quarter of it, or all are variations of this picture, the only picture he took. Okay? And it was in Jurbel in 1913. He spent 33 years of his life in either exile or house arrest. Imagine someone, and they thought they were burying him, not knowing that they were planting him, because so many seeds grew from this. Every single thing they did to deter him, to punish him, it actually led to everything they thought was adab to him, which means punishment. It was Allah turned it to azbun, sweetness for him. So much so that the last 15 years that they placed of his life in house arrest, he saw the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in a wakeful state 15 times. Without them exiling him to Gabon, they wouldn't have seen the karama of him praying on water. Without them sending him to Mauritania, the many scholars he met there, so every single thing that they did to punish him, to deter him, to pull him down, because he was not focused on their actions at all. What was he focused on? Allah and His Messenger. As such, he had no hatred for these guys. He had no, you see what I'm going to do to you when I get power. One of the biggest faults, one of the biggest travesties of human civilizations is that people that have been dealt with oppression, people that have been oppressed, a lot of times when they gain power, what do? They become oppressors. Why? That's all they know. Because during the oppression, all they were focused on was the oppression that they were dealt with. But with Sheikh Ahmed, what was he focusing on? Allah and His Messenger. So there is no way he could see anything that was done to him as anything done other than from Allah and His Messenger. In fact, before all of these problems started, when he had a vision of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ where he said to the Messenger of Allah, I want more than what I currently have. And Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said to him, if you want more than where you are right now, you would have to go through unspoken tribulations and you will not complain to anyone. Or you would not ask anyone for help for it. And he said yes. And that was visible in the kind of tribulations he went through throughout his life. Right? Because, as you know, there are 2 wings that a believer should have when they're traveling to Allah. There's a wing of shukr for every single blessing that he faces. And then there's a wing of sabr for every tribulation that he faces. Right? Sheikh Ibrahim Yes used to make dua that, oh Allah, cause me to be spiritually elevated through the path of shukr as much as you've caused others to be elevated through the path of sabr. Right? So he was really, with everything that was dealt with, that he was dealt with, he never waned. He never lost focus of Allah and His Messenger. And he never allowed the bitterness that he was dealt with to affect him. I found this very funny when I found out that the French actually tried to award him the Cross of the Legion Honor. Can you imagine? Honestly, the cheek, right? After all these things you've put this man through, and then you want to award him the highest award that you have. Guess what he said? Right? That was his response. I'm the captive of God, and I recognize no authority but His. My reward falls on the generous giver for the service that I render upon the Prophet, and He's the most excellent of givers. I don't need your honor. I don't need your notification. I don't need any. I have nothing that I need from you. Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. Allah is enough for me. And what an excellent one to put your trust in. So he established Tuba, that you saw earlier, in 1924. Official permission was given in April 1925. So this date of his exile here is celebrated yearly in Senegal, called the Magal in Tuba. Yes?
Sorry, why did they want to award him the cross?
Because they realized that that was their way of trying to buy him. Right? He was now a legend. What do you do to a legend? You either join them. If you can't beat them, it's best you join them, right? So they couldn't beat him. They tried everything. And they knew they couldn't kill him. Because if they did, So they tried to see, imagine if he collected this honor. Now he is someone honored by the French. He's someone that, now they can speak to him in a certain way. Oh, we only invite people like this, so these kind of meetings come and, But he had zero interest in the dunya. That's my opinion. Allah knows best why exactly they tried to do that.
So what reason did they have given to the public of why they awarded him this cross?
Because they wanted to show who the boss is. With colonialists, they have two ways of ruling. They either remove all the rulers and just kill them and or make them puppet leaders. It's either or. There's no other option. Right? So he wasn't prepared for any of those. So they knew that it wasn't possible. By the time they started noticing him, they couldn't just kill him. So they tried to put him to a place where he would have died of natural death. Didn't work. Right? He came back, his community has grown from like this to that. Then they wanted to show him who the boss is. He didn't budge. They sent him again to another place, very difficult. Didn't work. They thought, okay, right, let's just bring him back, put him under house arrest. And he was in house arrest till he passed away. Under house arrest. So this is the kind of thing that when you, as a student, when you study this kind of history, it's not, the kind of bitterness that you feel you should have towards people who have done this. But if you want to take his example, you don't focus on these people or their actions. All your focus should be on who is Allah and His Messenger. His actions and everything he reacted, everything he did was because his focus was only on Allah and His Messenger, not on what was done to him. And isn't that what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did as well? Like when the Quraysh, everything they did to him, expelling him, when he had the chance to exact revenge, what did he say? What kind of person would say, go? What kind of person would say, whoever enters into the house of Abu Sufyan is free? Abu Sufyan, who killed many of his companions. Right? So when you recognize, he was someone who had complete fana, complete annihilation in the Messenger of Allah. Yes, you had a question.
I don't know if the different pieces of the jigsaw puzzle don't seem to align very well with me. I was thinking he was under house arrest until he passed away, yet the French were trying to award him the national award.
That was a bribe attempt.
I see what you mean now. Okay.
That was an attempt to bribe him. Imagine if he collected that, then he is part of the, the special elite people honored by the French, you know. So it's a, you know, it's a normal political tactic. If you can't beat them, you try to join them, right? And they couldn't beat him, so they tried to bring him in, but he refused, right?
I suppose the government would have no justification for their actions.
If you read colonial history, they don't need justifications for many things, right? But in this case, they knew it was not a risk they were prepared to take. They would lose Senegal if they had done anything to him. They would literally lose the whole country, right? Till date, he is this known, celebrated hero in the whole of Senegal. His tariqah is the most followed one in Senegal. So they didn't decide to honor him because they became nice or they were really good people. It was a bribe attempt. And they didn't kill him, not because they were good people, because they knew that that was suicidal for them. You know? So, any other questions? You can, by the way, feel free to ask questions while we continue. This part was the most difficult part for me to do. Because how do you quantify 7 tons of books? Right? How do you even start to quantify what he did? He was known as Khateeb al-Rasul. Not Khadim. Imam Anas bin Malik was known as Khadim al-Rasul. But he was a Khadim bil-anfikak. Right? He was a Khadim of the Messenger of Allah without stop. Right? He lived a life he just wanted to live a life of complete service to the Messenger of Allah. He left behind numerous fully functioning communities throughout Senegal. You know, he had a very strong work ethic. He wrote hundreds of books on numerous topics, on madih, praise of the Prophet, adab, fard ayn, seerah, in salawat, you name it. There's a missing, oh no, there's no missing, I thought there was a missing parenthesis there, right? He wrote loads of books on loads of topics. When I visited Touba Library, loads of books, okay? And he also wrote the whole Mus'haf by hand many times during his life. That was something which they did his daughter as well gave him a Mus'haf written by her that she wrote by hand. That's how they would say, like, you know, they have given a gift that they know he would like. Their handwritten Mus'haf, from memory, of course. Okay. He had a wird of the Quran, right, which he would just read the Quran regularly, right, and he would do regular khatams. There is a place in his mosque now where they do tens of khatams daily, right, in his mosque in Touba. He wrote, his knowledge is really immense, but he wrote many, anyone knows what an acrostic poem is? Right? A poem where, like, the first line, like, for example, he wrote one on Rabbi Zidni Ilma. So the first line of the poem starts with Ra, the second part starts with Ba, the third line starts with Ba, the fourth one starts with Za, like that. He wrote loads of these, right? He did compose a versification of several classical texts before the Mauritanians did this. Now, Mauritanians have done a lot of this, right? But he did this before they started doing this. Manzuma. He wrote Mawahib al-Qudus, you know, about Aqidah, about Imam Sanusi's Aqidah. He also wrote versification of Al-Akhdari, Jawharat al-Nafis. I bought some of these books when I went to Touba. I was speaking to, I'll tell you my sources for this later on, but I was speaking to Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba about him a few days ago, and when he was telling me these books, I was like, I don't know why these books sound familiar. Then I looked into my library, I was like, I know why, because I got these books when I went there. And, you know, Masalik al-Jinan, about Alfiya, and about Tasawwuf of Takhalluq and Tahaqquq, you know. And he wrote another poem, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ, whereby, like, the first, he in this poem is a rhythm prose where he mentioned, oh no, sorry, this is another poem. This one, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ, the first wow of this, he wrote 12 verses on wow, right? 12 verses because Prophet Muhammad was born on the 12th of Rabi'ul Awwal. And the first line of each verse starts with wow, and the last line of the verse also ends in wow. And each one has a description of the Prophet Muhammad with wow, right? And he did that for wa, in, na. I mean, this is the kind of knowledge you just think, where do you even start to quantify this kind of genius? Okay? He also wrote rim prose, where Muqaddimatul Khidmah, where he mentions 786 names of the Prophet Muhammad in different languages, right? Like Paracletus, Mushaffa, and so on and so forth. He wrote numerous books on adab, books on fardu ayn, and as he said, you know, with everything that was done to him, yet it never caused him to increase in anything but love for Allah and His Messenger. In his book Khatmatul Munajat, he said that this was towards the end of his life. He said that he saw Jibreel alayhi salam in a vision, bringing the Kaaba filled with his books and placing it over Tuba. Right? This was the kind of vision he had. Okay? And he developed a real strong Islamic pedagogy built around Quranic education in Senegal. So you go to Senegal, one of the people I used to teach, I teach Arabic, and at the end I would take people to different places. And when I chose to take them to Senegal last year, December, people were saying like, why Senegal? Like, they didn't realize that there's so many people in Senegal because of giants like this that can speak fluent Fusha. So I remember one of my students telling me, oh, I was in a taxi today and the taxi driver was speaking fluent Fusha. I was like, yeah, they have giants here that have set up so many institutes that people, at the very least, they do two things. Hifz of Quran, knowing Arabic language. That's like the lowest common denominator. Like you can't graduate from their schools without those two things, right? Of course, that's just the foundation, right? A lot goes other than that. So he built a very strong focus on work ethic. So of course, with the French, what they saw was that, well, if the economy is growing, we're benefiting from that, right? So they didn't look at this guy from they just looked at to what interest was good for them, you know. And, you know, the people he left behind, even till date, you can see a lot of the work that they continue to do, to educate, to help the poor, to build. No one can become a president in Senegal without going to Toba and getting it's okay, right? So that's the long and short of it. Other than that, I thought I'd share some of my drone shots with you guys so that you can see some nice, beautiful places. This was a really amazing, not just my drone shots, I also thought I'd share with you some of his sayings. I took these pictures when I was in Toba. You know, he said, Karamati khattu yadi fi khidmati mu'ayyadi. You know, my miracle is in my writings, okay, in the service of the helped and supported one, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, right? So he's saying, if you want, and why would you think he would say something like this? Anyone want to guess why? Because everyone had heard about what? The man who prayed on water, right? Everyone had heard that, and you know, they would just go, oh, that sheikh that prayed on water, that sheikh that, right? And they say, no, don't be deluded by that. That was out of necessity, right? That was out of necessity that I needed to pray, right? This is my karama. Go and read what I left behind. Go and read my qasa'id, right? Like the poet said, qasa'idul qawm mutunun ilmiyya liman kana lahu dhawq. The poems that these people leave behind are real strong texts of knowledge for anyone that has a spiritual taste. Okay? That's one of the sayings. Another one, وَلْتَعْلَمَنْ بِأَنَّ عِلْمًا وَعَمَلًا هُمَا وَسِيلَةَ السَّعَادَةِ أَجَلًا. Let them know that knowledge and action, these are the two means of eternal happiness. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Right? Knowledge without action is vanity. Action without knowledge is insanity, like Imam Ghazali said. Okay? And he also said, وَمَنْ نَهَاكُمْ عَنِ التَّعَلُّمِ فَنَهْيُهُ إِلَى الضَّلَالِ يُنْتَمِي. Anyone who keeps you away from seeking knowledge, who tells you, don't worry about seeking knowledge, don't worry about all this fardain and all of that, just come and, be my, student and you'll have everything, I have all the guarantees for you. Believe it or not, there are many sheikhs that are like that, right? Sorry, I said shaitans, right? There are many shayateen that are like that. In fact, one of my own brothers, he was a student of Sheikh Ibrahim Niyas, and his sheikh in Nigeria for over 10 years never told him about any writing of Sheikh Ibrahim Niyas. Never told him that. So Sheikh Mahi Sise came to Nigeria once and they both went to visit him. And then Sheikh Mahi Sise said to him, oh, have you read this book? And then he looked around and was like, Sheikh Ibrahim wrote books? Right? He thought the whole spirituality was just, how you feel, He sacked the sheikh straight away. That was the end of his relationship with him, right? Because there are many people you'll find that rather than taking you to Allah, they make they're supposed to be doors, but they make themselves a goal, right? They have, and people like Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, whose lives, okay, this is telling me to stop. All right, I'll give myself 5 more minutes. Okay, people like Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, whose lives were totally dedicated to Allah, right? For them, their job is to take people to Allah. That's it. They have no interest in what interest you have in them. Their only interest is, are you going to Allah? Are you traveling to Allah? Are you on the path of the Prophet? Khalas. Right? But you will find many shayateen who their egos will want you to be with them. And if you're not with them, you're against them. Their dedication or definition of loyalty is that you must hate other people and love them. Or other people are wrong and they're right. These kind of scholars were not like that. And these people, they will tell you, no, don't go and learn from these people. Because if you learn from them, you learn their bid'ah, you learn their shirk, you learn that, and you become misguided, and you start to believe what they believe. Right? Or someone who wants you to be an intelligent person will say, go and read their books, and let's come back and discuss. Go and read it. Imam Abu Hanifa used to invite atheists into the mosque. Come, let's see what you have. He would not say, no, don't bring them here, they will corrupt our people. He knew that they were on nothing. Right? So people who have certainty about what they're on, they're not afraid of what other people believe in. And he used to really encourage people to learn. And anyone who forbids you from learning or who tries to guide you that you shouldn't learn, then they are shayateen. And all they're guiding you to is misguidance. Also he said, فَكُلُّ مَنْ بِعِلْمِهِ قَدْ بَخِلَ فَإِنَّهُ قَبْلَ الْمَمَّاتِ يُبْتَلَى. Anyone who has been stingy regarding his knowledge will surely be tested and punished before death. So you can imagine how he felt about what he had, knowledge-wise. He had to spread it, he had to give it. Okay? فَالْعِلْمُ لَا بِكَثْرَةِ الرِّوَايَةِ بَلْ إِنَّهُ نُورٌ مَعَ الدِّرَايَةِ. This is very, very, very special because many people think that knowledge is based on how much you've learned. Right? You've learned this much, so you're more knowledgeable. So knowledge is in reality a light that Allah places in your heart for the one who seeks the truth, with the ability, with the criteria for knowing what is right and what is wrong. And that was him. He decided to dedicate his life to Allah, to learn the Quran and Sunnah. Then Allah placed a light and he had an opening and he had a real connection and nearness to the Messenger of Allah that made him see him many times in a wakeful state. And if anyone, just for information, has like a question mark about, is it possible to see the Prophet in a wakeful state? Read Imam Suyuti's book on this. On the imkan fi ru'yati, on the possibility of being able to see the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He wrote a treatise on this. And Imam Ghazali also spoke about this. Okay? I already mentioned the quotes below. Oops, what did I do there? Uh-oh, shut down. I got tired. Khalas, it's like, there you go. Okay. So, where were we? Okay. So we had the last phrase, we mentioned it earlier, when they were accusing him of being a mujahid, meaning a terrorist. That's what they meant then. Okay, and that was his response. Yes, he called me a mujahid. My jihad is only in knowledge and taqwa. Knowledge, outer science, taqwa, inner science. The zahir wal batin. Right? And how do I do this? Abdan khadiman. Abdan to who? Allah. Khadiman to who? The Messenger of Allah. And in doing these two things, Allah wal muhayminu shahidu. The protector is the one that's witnessing all of this. Right? These are not statements you make out of some high ecstatic state. These are statements coming from real, pure, direct inspiration from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why reading these kind of things, you can try to realize the states that these people were in. Okay? That was really much of what I had to say. Anyone feel like seeing drone shots or you've had enough? Yes? Okay. This was a drone shot that I took while I was there. I went with a friend from Germany and a few other friends. That was one. Shot number one. Shot number two. Yeah, this is my guilty pleasure, you can say. Everyone has something that, yeah, anyway. I like taking drone shots wherever I travel to in the world. I took permission, by the way, before taking these drone shots. Yeah, this one I was a bit too excited by the moving around. So I see birds. When I was actually flying this in Nigeria, the birds literally almost attacked my drone. They were attacking, I had to bring it down very quickly. And true story, the second time I went to this place and I tried to take a drone shot, the drone crashed without explanation. Yeah, so I thought, okay, that's... so just to sort of give you a few guides as to... So if you, I can share this with anyone, to see a vault of his writing, he wrote so many books. Let me see if I can share this. Here we go. So you can see this. All of these are Quran he wrote by hand, right? And then all of these are the different poems, books. Just 764. Okay, that's online here. There are many manuscripts that have not been translated. But if you literally go to Tuba, you'll see filled with manuscripts. Okay, and this is the vault. So you click on any of these, for example. Let me see if I can find.
Are these translated?
What?
Are these translated?
9. All in Arabic. Yeah. But they've done a lot to put them, in digital form, So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam taslima. Rabbana akhrijna min hadhihi al-qaryati al-zalimi ahluha waj'al lana min ladunka waliyyan waj'al lana min ladunka nasira. So yeah, this is a poem on this, and then I think he wrote a qasida on this. رضيت عن مولد تعالى الذي ربنا. Anyway, this is the vault. Okay, so as you can see, this is the link here, qasida enpdf.fre.fr. Then other than that, you have a lot of his qasaid here. This one here, I'm going to play for a bit. 1 second. Let's try and put it here, see if it's better. No, this one. Heute. There we go. اشتغل.
في مدائح الشافعي ونك قصيدة بو خامني شيخ أحمد الخديم موكو بند الله الله ربي عوني وحسبي ما لي سواه الله 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 ربي عوني وحسبي ما لي سواه الله الله الله
good taste.
بسم الإله ينمو هائي بلا.
Yeah, okay, you guys are tired, I can tell. Okay, that's an example. Then we have
حمدا لربي خير مربي قدرا ما قلبي.
Okay, خلاص. I don't like things that keeps. لا أحب الآفلين. I don't like things that come and go. All right, there's another. That's one. Then this, this here, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, Peacemaker for Our Time, is a nice book if you want to do more reading. There's also Fighting the Greater Jihad, Ahmadou Bamba, the founder of the Muridi of Senegal. There's a link to it here. I have the links to all of these. Yeah, that's another one you can have a look at. That's evolved. That's another poem. Yeah, Fighting the Greater Jihad. This is a book for kids, written by Sheikh Mendes' wife. Okay, Sayyida Ruqayya. She wrote this. So this is Ahmad Bamba, the sage of Senegal. That's the vault. That's another. You see another variation of the picture. Yeah. So that's the kind of. I just wanted to share this so that you can see. This is Dr. Ahmed Perzad as my teacher, who wrote a PhD on this, and that was a huge source of a lot of what I've shared today. And also this book, Fighting the Greater Jihad, it just arrived today. So I had like good read for about a few topics, especially around the conversations and the with the colonialists, and I got this picture from them. Okay. Before someone else connects mine and plays something. Right now, whoever it is, that sound is someone else connecting. Where are we? Yeah, so those are the sources. His book, Sheikh Ahmed Bamba, his PhD is here. If anybody is interested, I can also share that with you. The epistemology of Ahmadou Bamba.